Welcome to the All Things Energy podcast. We're here to power up your understanding of the energy industry with some electrifying topics and some stellar guests. And without any further ado, it's really my pleasure. I'm super excited to have Jef Conn with Coldwell Banker Commercial, among many other things, to join us. Jef, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And we're in 2025. You're our first kind of recording here.
Excellent. I can't believe it's already 2025. Last year flew by.
2024. And 2025 just feels like a different number.
It is
right?
A different number.
It's a different number. Valid point. But the feeling of 2025, I don't know if it's just that midpoint, if it's that,
It's all new. And I'm excited about that because we have endless possibilities for 2025. And it's going to be great.
Exactly. And it's, we may dive into this in some form or fashion, but it's always fascinating. Number one, I love New Year stuff. Maybe that's just how I'm wired and the expectancy for new things. And that certainly is here. But, the last couple of years have been their own interesting journey. You get done with the cycle of presidential election stuff. And you and I have had this conversation on how the psychology of people.
It definitely changes around election times, and people are afraid to act, and they like to use it as an excuse to push decisions to later in the year.
Isn't that so true?
Yes, but I'm so glad that we're past that. So now
I know.
That can't be an excuse for not making real estate decisions right now, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, especially, we'll dive into this more. You touch the commercial sector,
correct?
Very different than the residential.
Yes.
And the decision-making process, the longevity of decisions, the amount of capital involved in the decisions makes it a completely different time horizon when it comes to all of these things.
Typically, they're much longer than residential. When you've got a family unit, you may have 3 or 5 or 7 people making that decision, but most of the time it's 1 or 2 making the actual decisions. We've got a deal right now where we've got another real estate broker on the other side who's in a different city, a management team that's in a different state, ownership that is in 2 different countries. And so we're 8 hours time zone differences between the two. So anything that circulates for a decision could be a week to make its way back around to us.
And the decision-making process for the principals involved, both those that are purchasing and selling, are, there's significant risks they're taking. I mean, not that a residential risk is not significant, but just the factors involved, very, very different.
Yes, there's less emotion. There is some emotion in commercial, but overall, there's less emotion because it's a number on a spreadsheet. In some of these companies, it is a small number on a very big spreadsheet.
That's right.
It's big to those local, but globally, it's not that big of a deal to them.
Well, and Jef, I always like to kind of back up with our guests and just say, man, how did real estate intersect into your life? How did it come about? Where did it come from? How'd you get into it? And why commercial?
Unexpectedly is how I got into it. It was prior to May of 2007.
Yep.
Friend was working for Rick Canop, who owns Coldwell Banker Commercial at the time, and they were looking for one more agent. I went and applied, and Rick was very kind. He said, not yet. Yep. I was still finishing up my degree at Tech and had our meeting. And I said, Rick, I think I want you to reconsider. So we had a couple more interviews, and he said, sure, I'll give you a shot. And it just turned out, I've learned later down the road, the person that they wanted to hire turned down the job. And so I kind of fell into it. And now in a few months, it'll be 18 years I've been doing this.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. It feels like 2 years, but it also feels like 2,700.
I started my real estate career in 2004, and that means 20 is the number of years. And it's just like, I still feel like a kid. I am in some ways, always learning. And yet it's like, but I've learned a lot in 20 years.
Yes. When you look at the whole real estate industry in Lubbock and in Texas as a whole, a third of our fellow colleagues have been in this business less than 5 years. And so when I look at who we're doing deals with, there's new names that come across my desk all the time. But I keep remembering, I've been doing this a long time. When you look at the big picture of real estate, we're the old guys in the room, Josh. We're no longer young.
I know. There's some gray specs to show for it. So kind of going back to the beginning stages, you jumped headfirst in the commercial side.
Correct.
So didn't touch the residential.
Even though you and I have the same license and every residential agent has the same one as ours, each broker gets to decide what we do. And Coldwell Banker Commercial, it's split up. We have a great residential company and we have a commercial company. And so it was, this is your lane. And then there's a lane within the lane.
That's right.
So it was, do you want to do retail or office or land, multifamily? So learning all the different types of real estate. And then my lane is office and industrial. So
when you started, was it office and industrial, or did you kind of get a perspective of everything and then you begin to niche into that?
We started on a Monday And on Saturday, we went to the ICSC conference. Now,
Oh,
this is
wow.
pre-COVID, back in 2007, where 55,000 people were there. And I looked around the room and said, retail is not for me.
Really?
I prefer to deal with guys whose names are embroidered on their shirt,
Yep.
not on their sleeve. Like
Yeah.
the bankers and lawyers always have their initials on their sleeves. I like the guy whose name's Buddy right here on the
Yep.
shirt. Those are my
Yep.
people.
Yep.
And those are the industrial people. And at the time, no one was doing industrial. It wasn't the prices that we see today. So it was harder to make a living, but that's what I fell in love with. And so I have done industrial and then added office onto that later. And it's been 18 years.
Okay. So you said something that just jumped out at me. It wasn't as prominent as an industry sector for, would you say for Lubbock? It wasn't as prominent?
For Lubbock, our
Yep.
prices were suppressed, which means when you're looking at volume, there wasn't as much volume to be had at the time,
Yep.
which does affect how real estate
Yep.
commissions are paid and how much you can make in it. So it was a very tough sector to break into. One, because I looked like I was 12.
Sure.
I was 20 years old. I needed somebody to take a chance on me. So I grew a beard. This beard's been here
Yep.
for
Yep.
that many years just to look older. And over time, people felt comfortable that I knew what I was doing. And now it's a much different story. Industrial is a very lucrative side
Yeah.
of things.
Yep.
And the prices have increased tremendously. So it's a whole different animal now than it was 18 years ago.
But you didn't even know that when you did it. And here's
No.
what I want to pick into, because I'm imagining some people sitting there listening and they're evaluating opportunities in front of them. All right. And I'm gonna describe it as often in your mind, you look and you see some bigger dollar signs next to opportunity A, but there's something in you that's going, man, opportunity B over here is less certain, but there's something about it that is just pulling me towards it. And what was it in you that said, I'm going to lean towards this industrial sector, which on the surface 18 years ago didn't look as lucrative,
Correct.
but you were willing to kind of dive into it. How did you, that's not easy.
It was a challenge, number one, because I knew that no one else was doing it. There were people who were tinkering in it. They were doing a few deals a year, but no one was specializing in it.
Yes.
At the time, I looked at a map and said, we've got a ton of land that could be developed.
Yep.
And looking at the cost of construction, it just made sense. Even back 18 years ago, cost of construction for an industrial building is typically less than a retail
That's right.
center or office. So people could more easily afford it. Also, it means there could be potentially better returns for investors.
Yep.
So that's what went through my mind 18 years ago. And the people, it all came down to the people. And that's our business. We're a people business. The industrial people were incredibly kind and generous and nice. And so I just kept hanging out with those people and
Yep.
having real estate conversations in their offices. And now 18 years later, having seen the shift, it's a much different picture financially when you're looking at the economics of building and leasing and selling and the brokerage of it. And had I not made that decision 18 years ago, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Were there people, I don't know the answer is yes. So who were the people in your early stages that were kind and generous to sprinkle education, experience, mentorship, maybe within your own office, maybe
Yeah.
outside of your office, that you said, man, that was such a game changer, that relationship?
It started with my broker, Rick Canup, who
Yep.
has been in this business 40 something years
I
now.
know.
He
Still
started-
goes to the office.
Still goes to the office every day. He's there. And he said, hey, I don't know as much about this. He was a multifamily guy, did a ton of multifamily before I was even born. And he said, hey, I'll help you with this. But also his brother-in-law, Dwight, who is no longer with us, but he was working doing industrial at the time. And he said, hey, let me teach you everything I know. So he'd go with me to meetings, and we lost him a few years later, but I learned so much from him.
Wow.
And had I only known I would only have a few years with him, I would have tried to soak up more knowledge.
Yeah.
But I learned so much from him, and he opened up so many doors for me. And my broker said, whatever education you need, CCIM is a big education. SIOR is a big education for industrial and office brokers. He said, go get it. I'll help you get it. We want to make sure that you know what you're doing so you can help people.
So this question could go lots of directions, but I'll say, looking back at 18 years, describe some areas that you feel like you've grown.
Oh, how long do you have?
I know. That's what I'm saying. We could probably take hours along here, but just maybe point to a few things that you're like, wow, I've grown in this area or that area.
One, I've learned how to think. So one of
That's
the
good.
most annoying answers someone can give is, how do I be successful in X, fill in the blank, is someone says, think. And Bo Tucker, who's wildly successful in brokerage and development, used to say, hey, the answer is just to think, guys. And I thought, Bo, that's the most annoying answer I've ever heard in my life. And then I realized this guy's doing a lot of production. I should listen to him. So I started thinking about my mindset and what I think is possible, and realizing I was limiting my success for the first, let's just call it 5 or 6 years of my career. I was still learning the industry, wasn't quite sure how big I can make this. And then I just said, hey, let's just start thinking bigger, read books about thinking bigger, connect with people at the state and the national level who are doing big business and ask, what are you doing different than me? And it all came down to, they believe they could, and I wasn't believing that I could.
Yeah.
So now fast forward 13, 15 years later, life looks a whole lot different because I believe I can do a whole lot more. And my idea of what's possible went from very small to much, much bigger. And so people who are just getting started in this business, the best advice I can give is whatever you think success is today, triple it and add a zero. Start thinking on that number. And when you get to that number and that starts seeming realistic, double it again and start thinking about that number. And that could be number of homes, number of production, how much income you're making. It could be a number of things, number of families you're helping. But we always have to think bigger.
And you said this too. I think this is so profound, and that is rub shoulders with, visually observe the journey and life of people who are thinking bigger.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to begin to tell yourself to think bigger. It accelerates the bigger thinking process.
Right.
When you see people like the Bo Tuckers, pick out someone else, you begin to see their journey. You're like, okay, that's not my path, but the way that they're going about it, I now see opportunity. I see potential. I can begin to, tailor that towards the direction my journey's going.
Real estate is so unique in that you and I are technically competitors, but we can learn so much from each other.
Yes.
So as a commercial guy, I have a unique opportunity to watch what residential agents are doing and figure out how to do that in my business, because we're not going to be selling the same thing.
No.
We might be serving some of the same clients, but being involved at the local, state, and national levels of our association and our industry has allowed me to meet some very talented people. And part of being successful is not being afraid to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but could I follow you for a day? Could I fly to Denver for a weekend and just watch what you do? And so I've had opportunities to spend time in Chicago and DC and San Francisco with some people who are doing really, really big business.
That's right.
And just follow them around for a day. And
a few more zeros in those markets.
Much more zeros. When the price per foot is $1,000 a foot instead of 200, what are they doing to win those clients? And so it's been fascinating. And all the people have been so generous with their time because I'm not competing with them. I'm 1,000 miles away in Lubbock, America, so that we just happen to share ideas with each other. It's worked out really well.
Well, and we call this the All Things Energy podcast because, my world kind of has been, still is in the real estate sector, but the thinking bigger thing, I'm just going to, hit on this one more time. I was in a meeting with a guy who started talking to me about, solar on a residential rooftop. And I'll be honest, I was not interested at all. I just sat there listening and my brain was like, this doesn't pencil out. I've run the numbers. I'm a former CPA. It doesn't economically prove. It's not interesting. And as I was sitting there, I've said this before, I felt like just God started speaking to me. Pay attention. There's a lot more here than you realize. So literally in that moment, in a meeting, at a lunch, my mind just started correlating the world of real estate, how real estate functions economically, the value of real estate today versus tomorrow, the return on real estate. And all of a sudden, thinking bigger intersected real estate with energy. And I was like, well, if you can own real estate, can you own energy? Is that possible? What does that world look like? And then it hit me as like, everyone touches energy. Everyone has to turn energy on. So maybe in this thinking bigger context, it unlocked this whole new world that we're, I'd say in the early stages of growing and beginning, because there was someone in my life like yours who challenged me to think bigger. So, man, I hope there's a lot of things people take away with, but I think that right there, Jef, is enormous in how you could grow.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's not an overnight thing. It happens to day after day. You have to recommit to thinking bigger. And over time, I've been doing this now, thinking bigger for 10, 13 years now.
Yep.
It's a whole lot easier today for me to think bigger. And my thinking bigger today is wildly different than it was 13 years ago. But it's something that we have to do often and then do it again and then do it again. And it's uncomfortable and it is hard. It seems impossible at times, but we just got to keep going at it.
So I'm going to pivot just a minute. And your I wouldn't say your career, but you made a decision somewhere along the way to really begin serving in our association membership. So, in the real estate world, for those of you that don't know, we've got local associations and the Lubbock Association of Realtors. We have state level associations, the Texas Association of Realtors, national. What in you kind of said, hey, I want to give some time and energy into that category?
Two things happened. One, some of our company values at Coldwell Banker was to be involved in our local association. That's what we decided we wanted to do. And I said, hey, if the company wants to do that, I want to do that. And then Nancy Rawls, who used to be with Remax, called me and asked me to chair the commercial committee. And I didn't know you could say no to these things. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And I learned a lot of the competitors that I have and the colleagues I get to work with. So I did that a couple of years. And then someone said, it was probably Nancy again, that said, you should run for the board. And again, I didn't know I could say no.
That's great. I love it.
Had I known I could say no, I'm really glad I didn't. It would have changed the trajectory of my entire career and my volunteer life. But I said yes. And so I kept serving and I enjoyed it, because part of serving on the local board in Lubbock, especially as you move into the leadership line, is you volunteer to serve at state committees. And I realized, oh, there's a whole big world at the state. And there's some very complex water and transportation and tax issues that we're tackling at the state level. And then I learned later at the national level. So I just started signing up. And in Lubbock, you're not guaranteed to move up, but once you serve as secretary treasurer, you tend to serve as chair-elect and you move up, and started getting involved and really enjoying the process, because as a commercial agent, we react to what's told for us or what's decided for us at those levels more so than being involved. So I enjoyed having a seat at the table.
Yep.
Also, for any commercial people who may be listening, there's not much competition when it comes to commercial. There's a lot of residential agents, but we need the commercial agents, and we don't have a long list. We can count on one hand the number of people that are signing up for things. So I realized it was easy to get accepted to that next level, the next challenge, the next level of responsibility, because I was an outlier. I was a commercial agent who wanted to be involved in a very residential world that had direct consequences for commercial.
Yep.
And I wanted to sit at the table. I don't respond well when people tell me to do something. I want to be part of it.
Yep.
And so I just kept saying yes and making lots of connections and meeting lots of people. And I believe that if you're involved in those types of things, industries don't run themselves. And so it takes people like you and I to step up and lead. I realized there's a whole big world on the leadership side of things at the state level that I wanted to step into. And part of that was learning, how do I run a successful business when I'm out of town a lot? And I'm now a past chairman. So in 2024, I was the chairman of the president of the Texas Realtors. It took about 10 years to get through that process. There's a lot of steps, like you want to be on the budget and finance. You want to serve as a regional vice president. There's a lot of stepping stones, if you would. And I didn't consider any role as a stepping stone, but there's things you have to do before you can move on. And I just learned that there's not many commercial people doing it. And if you enjoy it, you might as well do it. So it was a great year, but I had to learn how to run my business efficiently.
Yeah.
I can say this now, because if my clients realized how much I was out of town last year, they would probably have a little bit of a fit. I flew 142 times last year. Now we live in Lubbock, America. We sometimes have to connect through Dallas. So that does inflate the numbers a lot, but it's a lot of flights, and it's 125 days out of the office. And I'm so thankful that I was able to do that. And also so thankful that I'm the has-been, and my roles look much different and my travel looks much different. But it has taught me so much about running a successful business when I'm not physically in my office, and how it's possible. You saw me walk in today with an iPad, a Remarkable, and a phone. I can do almost anything with those three things. And so it taught me that I don't have to be confined to my office in Lubbock to make big changes. And I can do big deals in Lubbock, even if I'm sitting in an airport in Austin. So my vision of work changed drastically over the last few years. And I got an inside baseball front row seat to how our industry is run and the many challenges that 2024 and previous years our industry ran into around the real estate commission, specifically on the residential side. I know more about antitrust law than I ever cared to, but I know that we're now past the settlement, and the way we do real estate, let's be frank, hasn't really changed much. How we communicate how we do has changed a little bit. That's exactly right. But we're okay. August 17th was a big date in the residential world. We made it past that, and look at us, we're still doing just fine. I know. So I've learned that there are some very big challenges at the local, state, and national level that are still going on. Lawsuits are not being done, but we've got an incredible staff at the state level, at the local level, and the national level that are helping guide volunteer leaders like you and I to make good decisions for our 1.45 million members.
Well, and I think there's a thread that runs through all of this that I think almost all of us would agree to. And I don't care what business you're in, but it's a thread of do whatever it takes to communicate honestly, transparently, with integrity, all the factors around not just the transaction, but how you, who's, in our world, we're brokering, we're assisting, we're advising, consulting, whatever we're, how you're participating in it, how you're compensated in it. And I do think, the energy industry, the auto industry, pharmaceutical industry, everyone could learn from just more transparency, more honesty, being upfront about, and so if those are some of the things that come out of this, and certainly the way we document it, we disclose it, is part of what's coming out of this. The thread is just like, come on, let's just do what's already right. We should have been done before.
Hindsight's always 2020, and we don't have to go into all the details, but there were a lot of things that happened at the national level that affect you and I here locally that we had no part in. There's a lot of news stories and sensationalization of things that happened or that were perceived to have happened. But we made it out okay because we realized the mistakes were made in communication on those. Even the big lawsuit early on, we could have communicated with our members better. So now that we're past that, we can see, hey, we can do a better job. And it's taught me how to run my business better, quite frankly. Be more proactive in talking to my clients. Don't wait for them to call me. I need to be calling them because if they're calling me, it's already too late. They're already frustrated whether they say it or not. So my role has to be the one to communicate not only what's happening, but what's about to happen, and then reminding them that I said that before they call me. So it's a great practice for me, but it's all about communication.
It really is, man. I talked to some tenants and probably think I was like, listen, you're going to go through curveballs in life, but if the one thing that you can't always do is communicate effectively. I'll communicate to you, you communicate to me. We'll solve most challenges with good communication.
That's exactly right. If you're going to be late on your rent, just tell me. Don't wait till I find out.
Yeah, that's right. So let's kind of talk a little bit about West Texas. We're both in Lubbock. Lubbock is the hub city of what's happening, but certainly your business and what we do in the energy side touches lots of things. Give me your 2025 outlook for how you see business, economy, real estate's kind of the undergirding of so much stuff. And we get to touch that. You touch that a lot. What are you telling people? What are you telling yourself? What's your thoughts around outlook for this year going forward?
I am excited about 2025. I think it's going to be a fantastic year. Around August is when we started having people say, well, let's wait until see what happens with the interest rates. Let's wait and see what happens with the elections. And then the elections happened, and 2 weeks later, it's Thanksgiving. Or 3 weeks later. That's then it's the holidays, and then it's the New Year's, and then it's end of year tax preparation. There's a list of recurring excuses of why people do or do not do things. But I'm excited. We're past that. We've got interest rates somewhat stabilized.
That's right.
And the commercial world's a little different than the residential world. When the feds announce a rate change, it may affect residential. Historically, it almost directly affected it. And this year we saw that's not always the case.
Yeah, that's right.
Commercial lags behind that. So I think we will see some reprieve and some relief on the commercial interest rates. I would personally love that because that means our carrying costs are going to go down and our development costs are going to go down, and that's going to be amazing. But I think people are, especially in our neck of the woods, are feeling more confident about what's going on. And that's not a Democrat or Republican statement. It's just the election was decided. Thankfully, it was decided very quickly. Hey, we know who the winner is. Let's move on. And in our part of the world, people are accepting that and feeling more confident. I think that the overall sentiment of consumers in Lubbock has improved. When I'm out at restaurants or shopping, I see more people, and people seem to be buying more than they used to. When I'm in line at Costco, I realize the baskets are a little bit fuller than maybe they were right before the election. And I think that's a good thing. It's a sign that people are starting to feel more comfortable and they're going to move forward. We personally have a lot of projects that are going to come online in 2025, and hopefully we'll find tenants and buyers for those very quickly. And I think it's going to be a great year. Really, it could be one of the best years we've ever had. I think the 2023, 2024, let's just call it 2020 to 2024, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown. We kind of know where we are right now, and not saying it's perfect, but I think that 2025 has a great opportunity to be one of the best years we've ever seen on the commercial side of real estate.
I've said this, that I feel like from 2020 really through 2024, we had these odd, sometimes very real anomalies, sometimes subtle anomalies that really impacted psychology, business decisions, both at the residential household level, at the commercial level, from COVID shutdown to just, massive, at least on the residential level, this, craziness, slow supply inventory. On the commercial side, we had these supply chain constraints, we had interest rate stuff. And then we went in the complete opposite direction. Interest rate just, skyrocketed up. And then we're in an election year. So, literally for like 4 years, maybe even 5 years, 2021, 2, 3, 4. We've had these rather significant disruptions to what we'd say some type of normality. And it feels like now post-election, even if interest rates aren't as low as we all would love, there's, I call interest rate acceptance or normality around it. And so to your point, I am really curious, certainly very expectant and excited at really every level of our West Texas. I mean, the oil and gas industry has its trickle effect. The agricultural industry, certainly Texas Tech is growing. That, hospital, healthcare. I mean, all of these massive drivers of jobs, of economic dollars, capital investment decisions. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what takes place.
Absolutely. And like you said, they're all kind of tied together. So if real estate on the commercial side does really well, that could play a factor into the residential
That's
world.
right.
It'll play a factor in our sales tax. And when we're ordering metal buildings to install them, knowing that we don't have a 6-month supply chain issue, we can get them in a matter of weeks. Things are a whole lot easier in 2025. 2024, we really had to struggle and push some things through.
Yep.
I think those systems are going to be a little bit more well-oiled in 2025, and things will go a lot smoother.
So again, I said this earlier, the All Things Energy podcast. I like to kind of talk about how energy, I'll say partially because I'm in the weeds more than most, is having, I think, a growing influence in business decisions. I saw a real intersection when it came to commercial real estate, investment real estate. So you and I've had some offline conversations, over the last couple of years. How do you see the conversation or topic around energy, cost of energy, reliability of energy? We could talk about the data center world, AI world, the need for energy that's just crazy explosive. Tell me how you observe energy's impact now in business and real estate.
It's really important when we are on the development side of industrial parks, for example, or office parks, for example, near 98th and Interstate. We're looking eventually to have somewhere between 80 and 100 tenants in spaces, and that's 60 to 70 plus buildings. We've got to make sure we have enough literal electricity to go to those sites to power the widget maker and the office.
So you're telling me
lines.
you can't just, put a building and turn on electricity? It's not just magically there?
In a very big world, a simplified world, that would be how that works.
Yes.
But in the reality, it is very complicated. And out there, we work with the great people at South Plains Electric. And
fantastic.
it's so easy for them to say, hey, we tell them, here's our vision. Here's what we're planning to build. And they say, here's how we can do it.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of companies who don't start with no, who start with, I don't know, but let's figure out how we do this together. And we've been very blessed with them. And so having projects come online, even yesterday, I was looking at a cotton field yesterday, and we were talking about data centers. And this particular field is somewhat close to a source of power, but the person did not understand how power was going to come from point A to point B and why we needed so much power. They just thought data centers were the new thing. These obviously weren't the operators. These were people who were trying to make something happen. And so we kind of talked about the amount of power a data center needs is unlike anything we've seen here in West Texas. And it's possible. And with time and money, we can fix all things. And so it's possible. They just didn't understand how much data or how much energy was needed to run a facility like that.
I literally read an article, even this weekend, that in Yoakum County, which to those who don't know, it's just south and to the west of us, up towards the New Mexico border, Plains, et cetera. Meta, Facebook, just signed a big power purchase agreement for a data center that's connected into our South Plains power pool. So it's different than the ERCOT world. And I was like, wow, Meta is going to be dropping, or it's a third party developing out the solar farm effectively that's going to power some of their, stuff. And I'm just like, man, I was listening to a podcast driving back from the holidays, and it was a group that put out a white paper that got a ton of attention around the country, especially in the fast scaling AI data center worlds of like, how do we at speed, because we're in an arms race. We're in an arms race in the world. Again, I don't want to get too political, but between us and other countries in the East, to put up data centers. And the traditional way of powering it takes so much time to build out the infrastructure. There's this rethinking of, can we do it in a faster, scalable way? And this whole white paper came out with a lot of batteries, a big solar farm, and then attached to obviously some natural gas generation, because you've got to have an always on connection. And so I'm like, how do we bring this to West Texas? Because I would love nothing more than to be a small cog in trying to help bring these really big needs and solutions.
On the real estate brokerage side, we get the question a lot of how much excess power do you have? And that's not something the average broker is going to know. They won't know where to look to find that. And that answer is, well, it depends.
That's exactly right.
And so it depends on where you are, what you're looking to build, and why and how you need that power delivered to you, because there's a million different ways to skin that cat. So that's a typical question we get now is, what does excess power look like in our community versus Amarillo versus Houston? Where's the power coming from? And then what are some safeguards to make sure if there's a data center that's building in Lubbock, how do we make sure that they don't run out of power? And do they have backups upon backups upon backups? And so it's a little more complicated than, can you provide more power than anyone's ever heard of in Lubbock to this one side? It's, how do you make sure it's consistently there? So those types of conversations we weren't having 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, is when we really started to hear those conversations. And it started with crypto mining. People wanted to build big centers just to mine crypto. And when Bitcoin gets to $100,000 a coin, it makes sense why they're spending that much money and that much power to get it. But it's an interesting conversation, because never in my career of the last almost 18 years up until recently have we talked about power in the way that we talk about it today.
Well, maybe on an offline capacity, I think it's super fascinating. Again, it's not a one size fits all solution, kind of like it used to be. Just plug into the grid. Often those resources aren't there. So layering in additional energy asset resources, I think, is where things will go forth. And man, I love having those conversations to the degree that we can. You know, I've talked before, some of the new solutions that we're able to kind of roll out to small, medium, even large size commercial users is just paying them to install batteries on site.
Before, when people think of alternative energy, they just think of solar panels on a roof. That's all they think about.
I know.
That's one small portion, and no disrespect to anyone who's installing solar, it's the portion that makes the least amount of economic sense on the commercial side of things, especially in the new world where we have ERCOT provided data as opposed to when it was just LPML. For many, many years, we just had one number to call. That was it. That was simple. And we have more options now, but the economics has changed drastically. And so having reliable power not only is important from a cost saving perspective, but it's having to understand the complicated world of energy that we now live in. It's much different than it was. And I will save my personal remarks of whether it was a good idea or not, but it's a world we live in.
That's
so
right.
making sure people understand that it doesn't necessarily mean solar panels. It could, but it doesn't. But there are alternative options that could provide that power. And I think that's a new world that we're going to wade into. We'll see more of it in 2025 than we ever have.
That's right. It's one reason why I'm really grateful that our company, Rise Energy, I said, man, I'm really agnostic to the asset. A few years ago, it might have had a advantage for solar, this or that. We really saw batteries as the coming technology, and the moment we started to see the marketplace really reward and incentivize that asset, and then we kind of partnered with some people. I'm like, this is, again, tomorrow it may be different. I read this morning with the freeze coming across the country and, some kind of an impact in Texas. It was spitting out some statistics that compared to the winter storm Uri, which, sadly knocked out power for several days a few years ago, we have 20x the amount of power now generated from a battery asset that we had at Winter Storm Uri. So it's just saying, we're not going to have as bad of a freeze this week, but as people get nervous, the power resources that the state of Texas now has are dramatically different. Batteries being a big driver of it, and so forth.
But there's still not enough. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity for people to take a look at that. And as a commercial broker, a lot of times we're looking at what's the net operating income, the bottom line, the NOI. And there are some alternative resources with battery that could add dollars, real dollars, to that bottom line. And from an investor who may not necessarily care where the utilities are coming from, they just care that they're getting rent. I think there's going to be more conversations around that than there will be, than there has been in the last few years.
Well, and I think that puts a great bow around. I think what excites me about being in the energy space is that I understand very clearly in the commercial side, especially the investor ROI side, what drives it. And if I can introduce solutions, especially low cost, sometimes no cost capital solutions that drive up NOI, increase valuations, that's a conversation almost every commercial owner is going to want to pay attention to.
Sure, absolutely.
So, man, time has flown by. I try not to let these things run past 30. And I'm looking at my watch going, Jef, we've covered a lot quickly. So we may have to have another conversation. May have to bring you back because this has been a lot of fun. I like to kind of wrap up our time with a little bit of a reflective, okay, what would Jef Conn tell his younger self? You've given some great advice so far, but if I could kind of close us out with that question, what's something you'd tell your 20-something self or a 20-something, listening?
there's going to be a lot of competition no matter what you're doing. If you're in the real estate world, if you are working at Dillard's, if you work at Tractor Supply, whatever you do, there's a lot of competition.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that you're not capable and you're not worthy of whatever success looks like to you, because success is more than just dollars and cents.
Yep.
It's time with family. It's vacation on the beach. It looks different to every person, but there is limitless opportunities and success that you can reach no matter what you're doing. Even if you have, in our case, there are over 1,700 realtors in Lubbock, America alone. We are just two of a very big pool of people. However, you and I are finding success. Everyone that we deal with, they're finding success. And so there is a massive amount of success, no matter if you feel a little overwhelmed. And if you're newer in the real estate world, just keep showing up. Return the phone calls, be proactive. It will all work out.
Yeah, man, that is such a good word. I tell that to people as they're getting started in real estate. I'm like, you'd be shocked at if you would just do what so few are doing. The competition doesn't matter. You take care of people, you serve people, you show up, you plant the seeds, and the opportunities will just overwhelm you.
Absolutely. And I would tell the 20-year-old, sometimes they get out of college, even for some high school, they stop reading. Keep reading, keep learning new things. Yes, you can read Harry Potter, but is that going to grow your business? Probably not.
Yeah.
But start now and keep reading things, because the more you read and you grow and you learn, the more successful you're going to be the next day, the next year, 5 years from now.
All right. So just an author, a book or something, there's so many of them out there, but what's maybe one little nugget you throw at someone?
There's all the real estate books you can look at. Good to Great, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller. I read this is a fiction book, but Never Lie by Frida McFadden. And it's not about telling the truth. It is a murder mystery, because I do love murder mysteries. When I tell you I yelled at this book when I turned the page and realized what was happening, it was one of the best books I've read in a very long time. But I think it's very important. There's a book called The Gift.
Yes.
And I liked it, but it was also kind of annoying, if I'm real honest. But it taught me to think differently about how I'm treating my clients and how I'm giving back of my time. And so a lot of the reason I got involved at the local and the state level and am at the national level is that's my way of giving back to our industry. I've learned a lot. I've been successful. This is my way to give back and make sure that there are good decision makers at the table at all three levels of our organization.
That's so good. Keep reading, man. There's so much good stuff to expand your mind. Jef, this has been so good. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun.
I mean that. Yes. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of the All Things Energy podcast. As always, check us out at Rise Energy, our social medias. That's at Get Rise Energy, our website, www.getriseenergy.com. Until the next one, go out there, make a difference, learn and grow, and watch your world really change.